They laughed at this elderly black woman in karate class until she revealed her black belt. The moment Thelma Gardner stepped into the karate dojo, leaning on her wooden cane, the room went quiet for half a second. And then the whispers started. Some students smirked. A few tried to hold in their laughter. Others exchanged quick glances like they were all in on the same joke. To them, she looked like someone's grandmother who had wandered into the wrong building. She wore a floral sweater over her shoulders, her steps slow, careful. Her white hair was neatly pinned up. Her hands shook slightly, but none of them looked at her eyes, calm, steady, and alert. Watching everything, she walked up to the front desk where a young woman sat scrolling on her phone. "I'd like to observe a class," Thelma said politely. The girl blinked. "You want to take karate?" "Yes," Thelma smiled. "Is that allowed?" The girl hesitated. "I mean, sure, I guess. Have a seat." Thelma nodded and sat quietly on the bench along the wall, hands resting on her cane. Through the glass window, she watched the class inside, young adults moving in sharp, fast patterns. Their white uniforms snapped with each punch. Their voices rang out with energy. Leading them was a tall man with a firm voice and a black belt tied tightly around his waist. That was Sensei Rick. He barked commands like a drill sergeant, walking up and down the mat. His eyes scanned the students, sharp and focused. The class ended with a bow. Laughter filled the room as students began chatting and changing shoes. Thelma stood and approached Rick. "Excuse me," she said gently. "I'm interested in joining your beginner's class." Rick gave her a polite smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Our classes can be pretty intense," he said. "You might want to consider something more low impact, like Tai Chi." "I'd like to try karate," she replied. Just then, two boys, loud, confident, and clearly full of themselves, walked by. One of them pointed toward the community center down the strip mall. "Bingo night's that way, ma'am," he said with a grin. The other one burst out laughing. Rick didn't stop them. He just gave a weak chuckle and turned back to her. "I'm sorry," he said. "We just don't want anyone to get hurt." "I understand," Thelma said. "Maybe we could try a trial class. If it doesn't work out, I'll step away." He hesitated. A woman stepped out from the office. She looked like someone in charge, confident, serious. "I'm Erica," she said. "We believe in inclusion. Let's give it a try. Amanda, please get her signed up." 20 minutes later, Thelma walked out of the locker room in a wrinkled, oversized white uniform. She tried her best to tie the white belt around her waist, but it ended up upside down. The same two boys, Tyler and Josh, were watching from the bench. "Look, Josh," Tyler whispered loudly. "Grandma's ready for battle." They laughed. Again. Thelma ignored them and walked up to Rick. "Is this right?" she asked about the belt. Rick adjusted it quickly. "Good enough. Just follow along." The class began. Thelma stood at the back, struggling to follow the moves. Her knees didn't bend easily. Her balance was off. She had to reach for the wall a few times. Her blocks were too slow, her punches too weak. Some students giggled. Rick gave her a look, half pity, half frustration, but she didn't stop. Not once. She kept trying, quietly and seriously, with no sign of giving up. After class, she bowed deeply to Rick. "Thank you, Sensei. I'll be back Wednesday." Rick gave a short nod, clearly unsure what to say. In the locker room, Thelma overheard Tyler and Josh laughing again. "Did you see that horse stance?" Josh said. "She looked like a baby giraffe." They laughed until a quiet voice interrupted them. Mia, a younger student, said firmly, "That's enough." The boys scoffed but didn't argue. Thelma didn't react. She just folded her uniform, placed it carefully into her bag, and walked out of the dojo, cane tapping steadily against the floor. Outside, the sky had turned orange. The wind was cool. Her old Buick waited quietly in the parking lot. She drove home in silence. No music, no phone, just the road and her thoughts. Back in her small apartment, Thelma made a simple dinner and sat alone at the table. Afterward, she walked into her bedroom and opened a wooden box from the closet. Inside was a faded black belt, the fabric worn thin, and a photo of her younger self, standing with a group of martial artists in Japan. She looked at the photo for a long time. Then she whispered softly to herself, "They don't know who I am yet, but they will." Wednesday afternoon came. The sun hung low in the sky as Thelma parked her old Buick in the same corner spot outside Golden Dragon Karate Academy. She sat behind the wheel for a moment, looking at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Calm eyes, soft face. She adjusted her glasses, took a deep breath, and stepped out. Inside, Amanda at the front desk barely looked up. "They're starting in 15, she said. Thelma nodded politely and walked to the locker room. Her uniform was still slightly too big, but she had taken time the night before to press it and practice folding it neatly, just like she used to decades ago. She tied her white belt again. This time, it looked more correct. Still not perfect, but closer. In the hallway outside the training room, she passed Mia, the young girl from the other day. "Hello again," Thelma said with a warm smile. "Hi," Mia replied, this time with a little more ease. "Glad you came back." "Oh, I said I would, and I always show up when I say I will." Mia gave a small smile, then walked ahead into the dojo. Today's class was a bit larger. A few more beginners had joined. Most were in their teens or 20s. Thelma stood at the back again, quietly stretching as Rick entered. His expression was unreadable. Not warm, not cold, just professional. "All right, line up," he called. "Basic punching drills today. Focus on technique over speed." The students formed rows. Thelma moved a little slower than the others, but she got into position. Rick demonstrated a punch. "Chamber your fist here. Step forward. Punch from your center. Ready? Go." The room echoed with thuds as fists struck the air. Thelma was a beat behind. She threw her punches too high, then too low. Her footing was shaky. On the third round, she lost balance slightly and had to catch herself. Tyler, off to the left, nudged Josh. "She's gonna break a hip," he whispered. Josh chuckled, not bothering to hide it. Thelma heard them. She always heard them, but kept her gaze forward. Rick walked past her during the next round. "Try to punch from your core, not your shoulders," he said, in the tone you use when you're already expecting someone to. "Fail," Thelma nodded. "Yes, sensei." Next came basic blocks. Thelma's hands moved slowly, sometimes forgetting the sequence. She went left when others went right. Her footwork lagged. The whispers began again. Eyes rolled. Small laughs. A few students smirked. Rick noticed but didn't say anything. But Mia noticed too. After class ended, students began to scatter, chatting, removing their belts, laughing about weekend plans. Thelma stayed behind to sweep the mat with a large cloth. "You don't have to do that," Rick said when he saw her. "I know," Thelma replied softly. "But I like to respect the space." Rick just nodded and walked away. As she left, she passed by the men's locker room. Through the thin walls, she heard voices. "Did you see her front stance today?" Josh laughed. "She was wobbling like a newborn deer. She even bowed like she was in some kung fu movie," Tyler added. Then, unexpectedly, Mia's voice cut in. "Enough. Seriously." "What? You her fan club now?" Tyler said. "I just think you don't need to be jerks about it." Thelma paused outside, then quietly kept walking. She didn't need to hear more. She'd heard enough of that before, in other places, in other decades. She stepped into the evening light. Her cane tapped rhythmically as she made her way across the parking lot. The air was cooler now. A light breeze brushed her sweater. She unlocked her car. placed her bag gently in the passenger seat, and sat for a moment in silence. That night at home, she ate quietly again. Then she lit a single candle on her kitchen table. Across from it sat an old framed photo of a younger version of herself next to a man in uniform. "Second day went about as expected," she said out loud as if speaking to him. "They still think I'm slow, clumsy, helpless." She smiled faintly. "Let them." She stood up and walked to the hallway closet. From the top shelf, she brought down a small wooden training sword wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it carefully. The wood was worn smooth with age. She held it in both hands for a moment, letting the weight settle in her palms. Then she stepped out to her small backyard. Under the moonlight, barefoot in the cool grass, Thelma began to move. Not fast, not flashy, just steady. A silent kata. Each movement deliberate, controlled. Her eyes focused, her breath deep and even. No snickers, no mocking. Just wind through the trees and the creak of her old bones rediscovering something they never truly forgot. Back at the dojo, none of the students knew that the woman they laughed at was once known in Japan by a name they would never guess: Thunderhand. 2 days after her second class, Thelma sat alone at her small kitchen table, sipping tea as the rain tapped gently against the window. The house was quiet. A photo sat nearby, showing a young woman in a karate gi standing proudly in front of a Japanese flag, surrounded by men, all of them wearing black belts. She was the only woman, the only foreigner, the only one smiling. She looked at the photo, tracing her fingers across its faded edge. Then she reached down, pulled the old black belt from the wooden box, and set it next to her teacup. The fabric was soft now, worn down to a dull gray in spots. The embroidered Japanese characters were frayed but still readable, if you knew what you were looking for. She did. It read, Tanaka School, Thunderhand. Her title from a lifetime ago. Thelma leaned back in her chair, breathing deeply. Her body was slower now, but the fire, the reason she had walked into that dojo in the first place, hadn't gone out. It had just gone quiet. Meanwhile, across town, Mia sat curled up in the back corner of the public library, a book on karate history open on her lap. She flipped the pages idly, looking for something, though she didn't know exactly what. Then, suddenly, her eyes stopped on a name, Thelma Gardner. It was just a paragraph, small, easy to miss. But there it was. Among the few American women to train in Japan during the 1970s, Thelma Gardner earned the nickname Thunderhand for her speed and precision. She was known to have defeated several male opponents in open matches. Her career ended suddenly after the Tokyo Open of 1974, following a controversial decision and an injury that forced her into early retirement. The next page was missing. Torn out. Mia stared at the page for a long moment. She flipped back, looking for photos. There was supposed to be one, but someone had taken it out. Her mind started racing. Was it possible? Could it be the same Thelma? The quiet, clumsy old woman struggling to keep up in class? The one they all laughed at? She snapped a photo of the page on her phone and checked out the book. That night, Mia fell down a rabbit hole. She searched forums, old news articles, anything that mentioned Thunderhand or Tanaka School. Most links were broken or archived, but she found just enough. Grainy black and white photos, short biographies, half-erased tournament records, and that same name kept popping up. Thelma Gardner, Tokyo, 1974. Then silence. Back at the dojo, Thelma arrived for her third class. This time she didn't fumble with her belt. Her steps were steady, her face calm. Tyler and Josh were already there. As she walked by, they muttered something under their breath. She didn't react. Rick gave her a quick nod when she bowed. Still, distant, still cautious. But she noticed something in his eyes. Not quite suspicion, not quite respect. just curiosity. Class began. Stances, punches, blocks. Thelma moved with quiet control, still slower than the others, still out of sync at times. But her balance was improving. Her movements were intentional. Rick walked past her once and paused. She had made a mistake, turned the wrong way, but recovered with surprising smoothness. Like she had let herself mess up, but knew exactly how to fix it. He raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. After class, most students filtered out quickly. Mia stayed behind, pretending to look for her water bottle. When Thelma picked up her bag and walked toward the exit, Mia caught up with her. "Ms. Gardner?" she said quietly. Thelma turned. "Yes, dear?" Mia hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Weird." Thelma gave a small smile. "You can try." Mia held up her phone. On the screen was the page from the library book. "Is this you?" Thelma looked at it for a long moment. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. Instead, she simply said, "That was a long time ago." "But why pretend?" Mia asked. "You're clearly not just learning karate." Thelma's expression softened. "Because sometimes people listen better when they think you have nothing to teach them." Then, just before she walked out the door, she added, "Let them keep laughing, Mia. They haven't seen anything yet." That night, in the empty city park, under a flickering street lamp, Thelma moved through a kata slowly, alone, graceful, every movement precise. She wasn't performing for anyone. She was remembering, reconnecting, rebuilding, and hidden behind a nearby tree, unnoticed in the shadows. Mia stood silently watching, eyes wide, heart racing, as the quiet old woman from class transformed into something else entirely. The park was quiet, except for the sound of leaves shifting in the early breeze. Morning light hadn't fully stretched across the sky yet. Thelma moved, like a shadow among the trees, focused, smooth, silent. Her G was gone. She wore simple black training pants and a fitted jacket, her cane nowhere in sight. Each motion of her kata was slow but exact. A deep breath before each move, each stance flowing into the next, like a quiet song only she could hear. She didn't look like an old woman anymore. She didn't even look like someone fighting. She looked like someone remembering, returning. From behind a row of bushes, Mia stood frozen, unsure if she should interrupt or stay hidden. She had come to the park to clear her head after the strange conversation with Thelma the night before. What she found instead felt like walking in on someone's secret life. Thelma stopped at the center of the clearing. She stood completely still, arms loose at her sides, eyes closed. Then, without turning her head, she said gently, "You can come out now, Mia. Mosquitoes love the shade." Mia's heart jumped into her throat. She stepped out awkwardly, brushing off her hoodie. "I didn't mean to spy." "You did," Thelma said, opening her eyes. "But that's okay. Sometimes truth needs witnesses." Mia swallowed. "That wasn't what you do in class." "No," Thelma nodded. "That was me not pretending." "Why hide it?" Mia asked, stepping closer. "You're incredible." Thelma gave a small smile. "I'm not here to be incredible. I'm here to remember who I used to be." Mia sat on a nearby bench. "I looked you up." "I figured," Thelma said. "The internet tells part of the story, but not the whole." There was a silence. Not heavy, just respectful. Then Thelma added, "It's not time yet. Let them keep thinking what they want. When people assume you're weak, they tell you who they really are." Mia nodded slowly, eyes still wide. "Okay, I won't say anything." "Good," Thelma said. "But don't forget what you saw." The next day, class at Golden Dragon felt off. Word had started to spread, not because anyone had confirmed anything, but because things were changing. Thelma moved a little smoother. Her balance was stronger. She still looked like she struggled sometimes, but only if you weren't paying close attention. Rick was. He watched her out of the corner of his eye more often now. During a blocking drill, she made a correction to a younger student, just a small foot adjustment. And suddenly, the kid's form clicked into place. Rick noticed that too. Meanwhile, Tyler and Josh weren't giving up. Still playing sensei, huh? Josh sneered one afternoon, after Thelma quietly corrected Mia's posture again. Mia stepped between them this time. You have a problem with people trying to help? No, Tyler smirked. Just don't like being taught by someone who can't keep up. Thelma didn't flinch. She never did. Do your best, she said softly. And I'll do mine. That weekend, the dojo hosted a community open house. Parents, new students, and a local journalist showed up. Rick was in full instructor mode, demonstrating sharp, flashy kicks and board breaks with his top students. Thelma sat in the back, watching quietly. When the crowd started thinning, Rick called over his assistant instructor. Let's do a partner kata, he said. Impress the new ones. They lined up, bowed, and began. Thelma tilted her head as they moved, the same way someone watches an old favorite movie that's been slightly misplayed. She saw the mistakes, the rhythm just slightly off, the steps one count too quick. She never said a word, but Kenji did. An elderly Japanese man in a gray suit had entered the dojo silently, unnoticed by most. He watched Rick's movements with interest, but his eyes drifted to Thelma. When their gazes met, everything stilled, like the air around them recognized something unspoken. He approached her slowly after the performance. Your movements were always more graceful than his, he said in a soft, accented voice. Thelma blinked, and for the first time since she'd walked into the dojo, her face changed. Just for a second. Kenji Tanaka, she said. You remember? I remember everything. Rick approached, confused. Can I help you, sir? I'm here to observe, Kenji replied. I heard one of your students was a former Tanaka school champion. Rick frowned, puzzled. You must have the wrong dojo. Kenji turned to Thelma. I do not. That night, back in Rick's office, Erica slammed her tablet down on the desk. This has to be a mistake, she said. Why would a martial arts master train in secret like this? If she really is who he says she is, it could be good for business, but only if we control the story. Rick didn't respond. He was still staring at the door where Kenji had left. Something was starting to click. This dojo was built on structure, not surprises, Erica snapped. No, Rick said quietly. It was built on discipline. And I think I'm finally starting to understand what that actually means. Later that week, during another beginner class, Rick surprised everyone. He paired Josh with Thelma for light sparring. Josh smirked, clearly, thinking he'd get some entertainment out of it. I'll go easy on you, he said with a wink. You do that, Thelma replied. They bowed, began. Josh threw a slow jab. Thelma moved just enough to avoid it, barely a step, just a shift, of her hip. But the punch missed. He tried again, this time faster. Same result. Then a kick. She didn't block it. She wasn't fast enough to react. But she didn't have to. She was already not there. After 2 minutes, Josh looked frustrated. He hadn't landed a single touch. She hadn't even thrown a counter-strike. Rick blew the whistle. Enough. The room was quiet. No laughter this time, just confusion. And from Mia, maybe even a little awe. Outside that night, Thelma sat alone on the front steps of the dojo. The sky was deep blue. Her breath was steady. Her heart was light. She knew. The eye mask was slipping, and the world was starting to remember. Friday arrived with a strange energy in the air. Flyers had been posted for over a week. Challenge Day. This Friday, 6 p.m. Family, friends, and guests welcome. There would be exhibitions, light sparring, kata showcases. A bit of everything. But the real attraction? A handwritten note at the bottom. Special confidence match, Sensei Rick versus Ms. Gardner. Some thought it was a joke, others weren't sure what to expect. A few came just to see if it was real. By 5:30, the dojo was packed. Chairs lined the walls, parents with toddlers, teens with iPhones ready to record. Even a few local reporters had shown up, one from a community newspaper, another streaming live on social media. In the locker room, Thelma sat alone. Calm. Her GI laid out before her, ironed and clean. The same oversized white belt folded. Beside it, Mia walked in, already dressed, a look of concern on her face. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "You know they're setting you up." Thelma looked up. "Am I supposed to be afraid?" "No. I mean, maybe." "Rick's a 5th-degree black belt. And everyone's expecting you to fall on your face." Thelma smiled gently. "Let them." She tied the white belt with slow, careful movements. "I'm not doing this to prove anything," she said. "I'm doing this to remember." Mia sat beside her. "Do they know who you are?" "No," Thelma said. "But they're about to." Out on the floor, Rick stood center mat, warming up. His black gi was crisp, his red headband tied just tight enough to look confident without looking flashy. He greeted parents, shook hands with a few local business owners, made jokes. His voice was relaxed, but he checked the time twice in 3 minutes. Then Amanda tapped the mic. "Welcome everyone to Golden Dragon's Challenge Day." Applause filled the dojo. Amanda continued, "We have a variety of demonstrations for you tonight. Sparring, katas, and one special feature match to inspire our beginner students. A beat. Sensei Rick Walker versus Ms. Thelma Gardner." There was scattered applause, some chuckles. Someone whispered, "This'll be quick." Rick stepped forward. "To show that karate is for everyone, we're doing a light demo with our newest beginner student, Miss Gardner. She'll be performing a simplified kata followed by a light contact sparring exchange. Let's welcome her with respect." And then Thelma stepped out. There were a few gasps. She looked small on the mat. Her GI was still a bit too loose. Her white belt trailed too long at the ends. Her steps were slow, careful. Some in the crowd exchanged looks. "She's the one?" Rick performed the kata first. It was clean, sharp, and confident. His movements cut through the air. Every stance, textbook. When he finished, he stepped aside and nodded. Thelma walked slowly to the center. She bowed and began. The first few moves were hesitant, slightly off, familiar, just like every class. A few people started whispering again. Tyler leaned, toward Josh. "I told you," he muttered. "This is gonna be embarrassing." But then, somewhere in the middle of the kata, something shifted. Thelma's spine straightened, her weight settled, her arms moved with rhythm, precision, grace. And suddenly, the awkward old woman disappeared. Her breath flowed with each movement. Her feet struck the mat softly but firmly. Her hands cut through the air in perfect time. Every movement was quiet, but loud in the way that mattered. The whispers stopped. Phones rose in hands, recording. Even Rick stood motionless. When she finished the final stance, she held it, still, balanced, then bowed. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then, applause, slow at first, confused, then louder, then rising into something real. Thelma bowed again, calm as ever. Rick blinked, trying to regain control of the room. He walked to the center. "Thank you," he said awkwardly. "That was impressive. Now let's move to the sparring demonstration. Just a light round." They bowed to each other, assumed stances. Rick's was perfect. Thelma's looked simple, neutral, Almost lazy. Ready, Rick said. Thelma just nodded. He moved first, a light jab. She didn't flinch. He tried a low kick. Her foot was already gone. Then a combination. Jab, cross, front kick. None landed. She didn't block. She didn't retreat. She just wasn't there. Rick frowned. He stepped it up. A roundhouse followed by a spinning elbow. Not hard, just fast enough to demand respect. Thelma sidestepped with one step. Calm. Balanced. He tried again. Same result. Within a minute, he was sweating, breathing heavier. She hadn't touched him. Hadn't even attacked. But he couldn't land anything. The audience was silent. And then Rick overextended. A long punch meant to catch her shoulder. That's when she moved. Not fast, just perfectly. She stepped inside, lifted her hand, and gently tapped his chest, open palm, right over the heart. He froze. If she had wanted to, that tap could have broken his rhythm, taken his balance, even ended the match. But she didn't. She stepped back. Bowed. Match over. The dojo stayed completely silent for several seconds. Then Kenji, still seated in the front row, slowly rose to his feet. "She was never your beginner," he said, in a quiet voice. "She is Thunderhand Gardner." Gasps spread like waves through the crowd. 6-time All-Japan champion, Tanaka School black belt, and one of the last true martial artists of her generation. Rick stood frozen, his chest still tingling from her final touch. Josh and Tyler stared in shock. Mia smiled quietly, almost proudly. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Thunderhand? That's her?" Another person said, "I thought she was a myth." Thelma stood silently in the center of the mat. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just bowed. And as she rose, for the first time in decades, she stood not as someone pretending to be forgotten, but as who she truly was. After the crowd had left and the mats were rolled up, Golden Dragon Karate Academy felt heavier. The lights were still on, the air still warm. But something had shifted. The students had bowed. The room had applauded. Even Rick had shaken Thelma's hand before walking off, too stunned to speak. But now? Now it was quiet again. Still. Waiting. Thelma stood alone in the locker room, gently folding her gi into her bag. Her body ached, not from the match, but from the weight she'd finally laid down. The secret was out. Mia appeared in the doorway. "You knew this would happen," she said softly. Thelma gave a quiet smile. "I hoped it would, but I wasn't sure the world was ready." Mia stepped forward. "That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. The way you moved, the way you didn't fight," Thelma chuckled. "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not fight. Let the other person show themselves." Mia hesitated. "So, what happens now?" Thelma didn't answer. Not yet. Across town, in a dim apartment lined with framed fight posters and old trophies, a man in his 30s watched a video on loop. It was the match, the tap to the chest. He watched it again, and again. Finally, he stood. His name was Hiroshi Kojima, and he hadn't come to America just to visit. He had come for her. Back at the dojo, Rick sat alone in his office, flipping through a thick folder. Newspaper clippings, faded tournament flyers, grainy black and white photos, all with one name, Thelma Gardner. He'd pulled it from a storage box in the back. He didn't know why he'd kept it. Maybe out of curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe something else. He stared at one particular photo. A young Thelma, standing tall beside a Japanese flag, flanked by men twice her size, every one of them bowing. "She's been here all this time," he muttered. Erica burst into the room without knocking. "Do you have any idea what just happened?" she snapped, waving her phone. That video's already gone viral. Local news tagged us. Some martial arts blog reposted it. Dozens of comments. Rick didn't look up. Good. Maybe people will learn something. Erica scoffed. Learn what? That we've been made fools of? That a 70-something-year-old black belt's been playing beginner for weeks while you stood there clueless? Rick set down the photo. We weren't made fools. We were taught. She lied. No, Rick said calmly. She observed. She gave us a chance to show her who we really are. Erica shook her head. This isn't about philosophy. This is about reputation. We've built a brand, Rick, a program, structure, and she blew it up with one kata. Rick stood slowly, the file still in his hand. Maybe it needed blowing up. The next day, Thelma returned to her routine like nothing had changed. She helped a young boy fix his stance, guided a teenager through her first kata, answered questions, tied belts, smiled, bowed, no speeches, no drama, just presence. But the students were different now. They watched her more closely, listened harder. Even Tyler, usually cocky and careless, stood a little straighter that day. Josh stayed after class. He didn't speak right away, just stood by the front desk watching her pack up. My dad saw the video, he said finally. He used to fight MMA back in the day, lost more than he won. But he knows talent. He said, your movement. It was like something from a different world. Thelma nodded. Your father sounds observant. He also said I should learn from you. Josh's voice caught a little. Which is weird, because he's never told me that about anyone before. Thelma looked at him, kind but firm. You ready to train with your eyes open now? Not just your fists? Josh nodded. Then be here tomorrow, she said. Early, 6 a.m. That night, Mia dug deeper. She combed through forums and archives, piecing together the story that the internet had tried to forget. Tokyo, 1974. A rising American fighter. A tournament upset. A promoter exposed. A disappearance. One name kept, coming up in hushed tones, Kojiro, the fight promoter Thelma had quietly defied. Rumors said he'd built a gambling empire on fixed matches, until she ruined it. Mia stared at the screen, then her eyes landed on a name she hadn't seen before, Hiroshi Kojima, Kojiro's son, and suddenly she remembered the man who had been watching the dojo from across the street the day of the challenge match. Dressed neatly, watching but not speaking. Her stomach turned. She grabbed her phone and sent a message to Thelma. Are you safe? No reply. Elsewhere, Hiroshi stood in a private gym, wrapped hands dripping sweat. His students, younger fighters trained in aggressive hybrid styles, watched in silence as he struck a pad with rapid combinations. You saw the video, one of them said. She embarrassed him, another added, and he didn't even land a hit. Hiroshi stopped. She didn't beat him with power, he said, breath steady. She beat him with timing, control, purpose. He dropped the gloves. And that's what makes her dangerous. Back at Golden Dragon, Rick called a meeting. Students, parents, even a few former members filled the training room. He stepped to the center. No GI, just a gray t-shirt and black slacks. I need to tell you something, he began. About Ms. Gardner, and about this dojo. He told them everything, her history, her quiet arrival, what she taught him, not just through technique, but through her presence. We forgot something here, he said. We made this place about belts and trophies and business. She reminded us that martial arts is about something deeper, honor, focus, awareness, integrity. There was silence. Then Mia stepped forward. I found something else, she said. Her past didn't just disappear, it was erased. She projected the photo she'd found on the wall. Thelma in 1974, bowing beside an unconscious opponent. Someone wanted people to forget her, to bury what she did. And now that someone's son is here, gasps, whispers, "What do we do?" someone asked. Thelma stepped in from the hallway just then, having heard everything. "You don't run," she said. "You don't fight to destroy. You fight to restore." That night, after the dojo emptied, Rick found her cleaning the edge of the mat. "You okay?" he asked. Thelma nodded. "Storm's coming." He hesitated. "If it gets ugly, I'll stand with you." She looked up. "You already are." He bowed, and this time, so did she. A quiet fell over the dojo like a breath held too long. Outside, evening light spilled through the windows. Inside, tension swirled through the air, not loud but steady, like a pressure building from deep beneath the surface. The students were already lined up, not to train, to witness. At the front stood Rick, his posture straight, his face unreadable. Next, to him stood Thelma Gardner, dressed in her clean gi, no longer oversized, no longer hidden, with her original black belt tied around her waist. The ends were frayed, the fabric faded, but it looked more solid than any other in the room. Across from her was Hiroshi Kojima. His GI was sharp, his eyes even sharper. But behind that controlled face was something more than anger. Something that looked like confusion. Or maybe fear. Thelma bowed. Hiroshi bowed, and the world got quiet. 30 seconds in, they hadn't touched each other. They circled carefully, like two stories walking around each other, each one waiting for the other to speak first. Hiroshi attacked first, sharp, fast, a mix of traditional karate and modern striking, clearly practiced. Thelma didn't block. She stepped just out of range, her hand floating near his punch, but never meeting it. The crowd leaned forward, silent, eyes wide. This wasn't a fight. It was a conversation in a language most had never heard before. Mia sat at the front, recording. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from awe. Beside her, Josh sat forward on the edge of his seat, mouth slightly open. Even Tyler, who once couldn't go 5 minutes without making a snide comment, now sat completely still, like he was watching something sacred. On the mat, Hiroshi's breathing changed. Faster, frustrated. Thelma hadn't. Hit him once, but he'd missed her every time. He feinted left, spun right, threw a high kick, and she was already stepping inside it before it finished. She didn't counter. She simply stood where his balance had been, and he stumbled. "You don't fight like someone your age," he muttered. Thelma replied, without moving. "I don't fight like someone seeking revenge." Another exchange. This time, Hiroshi landed a light touch to her sleeve. Nothing powerful. "But contact," the crowd murmured. He pushed forward, a spinning elbow, too wide. Thelma moved again. This time, she placed a hand gently on Hiroshi's chest. Her fingers barely pressed against the cloth of his GI. But it stopped him, not from pain, from truth. She could have hit him, could have knocked him down, could have ended it. But instead, she stood still, hand on his chest, and said softly, "Your father built an empire on fear. I chose not to help him keep it." Hiroshi stared at her, breathing hard. "You ruined him," he said. "No," she said. "He ruined himself. I just refused to fall." He stepped back, staggered. The match was over. There was no cheer, no music, no celebration, only silence. Then, one by one, the students began to bow. Rick bowed first, then Josh, then Mia, then even Tyler, and finally, Hiroshi. He bowed low for a long time. When he rose, his eyes were different, no longer angry, just tired and maybe free. Later, as the dojo emptied, Hiroshi sat on the bench near the door. He stared at the floor, tapping his wrapped hands together. Thelma sat beside him. He didn't speak, so she did. "I trained with your father once," she said. "Not as his student, but alongside his champions. He wanted me to lose a match in 1974, offered me money, respect, a future, but it wasn't real." He looked at her, jaw tight. "And you walked away?" "I limped away," she corrected gently. "After one of his men stabbed me in the alley behind the venue. I nearly died." "My partner didn't survive," Hiroshi swallowed. His hands stopped moving. "I grew up hearing a different version," he said. "That you humiliated him, that you exposed him." "I survived him," she said, "and that was enough." Weeks passed. The dojo began to change. Rick and Erica parted ways, quietly, professionally. She left with a carefully worded statement about new opportunities. Rick took over fully, but not as the man who once saw the dojo as a brand. He stepped onto the mat wearing a white belt. "I want to learn again," he said simply. Thelma became the senior instructor, but she never demanded a title. She said titles were for people still deciding who they were. The new sign above the building read, "Gardner Tanaka Karate Academy." Not just a name, a bridge. Josh became a regular in the early morning sessions. No more flashy kicks, no more showboating, just quiet work, focus. He still had flaws, but now he noticed them. Mia was accepted into a martial arts writing program and began documenting the untold stories of forgotten fighters. Her first article, "The Legend Who Hid in Plain Sight." Even Tyler changed. He wasn't exactly friendly, but he was respectful. One morning, he showed up early and waited for Thelma at the edge of the mat. "Could you show me how you moved like that?" he asked. Thelma didn't answer with words. She bowed, then began to move, and he followed. Months later, the dojo held a new kind of challenge day. Not for belts, not for trophies, just a demonstration. Community members, parents, kids. Thelma stood at the front leading a class of children. One small girl, maybe 6 years old, looked up at her and asked, "Sensei, will I ever be strong?" "Like you?" Thelma smiled, kneeling beside her. "Strength comes in all kinds, sweetheart," she said. "But the best kind starts right here." She placed her hand gently over the girl's chest. "Right where your courage lives." And as the children practiced punches in the sunlight, the old master with the quiet hands, the sharp eyes, and the warrior's soul watched them. Not as a legend, not as Thunderhand, just as Thelma Gardner, a woman who had once been doubted, dismissed, forgotten, but never broken. Her fight was never really about proving people wrong. It was about showing them what was possible when you don't give up on who you truly are. And that was a legacy. One she was finally ready to share. Fade out, music rises, narration ends. If this story touched you, inspired you, or reminded you that strength doesn't always shout, please like, share, and subscribe. There are more stories to tell, more hidden legends among us, and more battles worth fighting, quietly, powerfully, patiently.